On a freezing Thanksgiving night, a 73-year-old mechanic was locking up his failing shop, rushing to a family dinner he'd promised not to miss. Then a desperate family appeared, stranded, kids shivering, begging for help. Staying meant breaking his promise again. But he stayed. What he didn't know, they were the governor and a federal judge, racing to say goodbye to a dying father. And what happened next didn't just save their final moments together. It saved everything he thought he'd lost forever. Before we dive in, tell us in comments where in the world you are watching from. It was a night before Thanksgiving, and the cold had teeth. Ray Dalton stood in the center of his garage, shoulders slumped, one hand pressed against the small of his back where the ache had settled in years ago and never left. He'd been on his feet since 6 that morning, and every bone in his body knew it. He was 73 years old. His hands were gnarled, knuckles swollen from decades of turning wrenches in all kinds of weather. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight was about getting home. His daughter had called 3 times that day. Each time, her voice had grown a little tighter, a little more worried. "Dad, please, just this once. Be there for dinner. We miss you." The last call had ended with silence, the kind that carried more weight than words. Ray clicked off the lights. The garage fell into darkness, save for the pale glow of the street lamp outside. He reached for his coat, already imagining the warmth of his daughter's kitchen, the smell of roasted turkey, the sound of his grandkids laughing. Then came the knock. Not a polite tap, a desperate pounding. Urgent, frantic. Ray froze, one arm halfway into his jacket. Through the frosted glass of the side door, he saw headlights cutting through the November fog. Shadows moved behind them, small, hunched figures shifting in the cold. He limped to the door and pulled it open. A woman stood there, her breath coming out in short, visible bursts. Her face was pale, streaked with tears that had frozen at the edges. Behind her, a man held 2 small children wrapped in a thin blanket, both shivering violently. "Please," the woman gasped. "Our car, it just died. Right on the highway. We've been trying to flag someone down for 20 minutes, but no one stopped. The kids, they are so cold. Please, can you help us?" Ray looked past her. Their sedan sat crooked near the curb, hood up, steam rising faintly into the freezing air. The back window was cracked. Inside, he could see a duffel bag, a worn stuffed animal pressed against the glass. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the dinner table already set, the chair waiting for him. He thought of the promise he'd made. Then he looked at the little girl in the man's arms. Her lips were turning blue. Ray stepped aside and gestured them in. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you out of the cold." He didn't know it yet, but the choice he'd just made, the one that meant missing the dinner he'd promised to attend, the one his tired body begged him not to make, would lead him to a moment that would change everything he believed about his own worth. The truth was, Ray Dalton was drowning. Not in water, in bills, in silence, in the slow, suffocating weight of a life that had slipped through his fingers one day at a time. The shop had never been his dream. It had been his wife's father's, a proud man who'd built it from nothing in the 1960s, back when a handshake meant something and people paid their debts. When the old man died, Ray had inherited it, not because he wanted to, but because Sarah, his wife, had looked at him with those soft eyes and said, "Please, it's all we have left of him." That was 17 years ago. Sarah had been gone for 6. Now the shop was a ghost. The equipment outdated. The customer base thinning. The young guys went to the franchise places with the clean waiting rooms and the coffee machines. Ray's place smelled like burnt oil and old cardboard. The sign out front flickered. Half the letters didn't light up anymore. He'd been behind on rent for 3 months. His daughter didn't know. She thought he was doing fine. Thought he stayed late because he loved the work. She didn't know he ate 1 meal a day to save money. She didn't know he'd sold his wedding ring last spring just to keep the lights on. And she definitely didn't know that every time he missed a birthday, a recital, a Sunday dinner, it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he was terrified that if he stopped working, even for a moment, the whole fragile structure would collapse. This year had been the worst. He'd missed Easter, skipped his grandson's baseball game in June, didn't show up for his daughter's anniversary dinner in September. Each time, he'd promised himself the next one would be different. Each time, something came up. A rush job. An overdue invoice. A part that needed ordering. The excuses piled up like unpaid bills. Tonight was supposed to be different. He'd sworn it. He'd turned down 2 last-minute calls earlier in the week just to keep the evening clear. His daughter had been so happy when he confirmed. Really? Dad? You'll really be there? He'd heard the disbelief in her voice. That had hurt more than anything. Now, Ray bent over the open hood of the stranger's car, his hand trembling as he unscrewed the battery terminal. The arthritis was bad tonight. His fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. Stiff, uncooperative, shot through with pain every time he gripped a wrench. The cold wasn't helping. Through the garage window, he could see the 2 kids huddled in the back seat of the sedan, wrapped in the blanket their father had given them. The little girl's eyes were wide, watching him. The boy, maybe 7 or 8, had his arm around her. Ray's chest tightened. He thought of Sarah. She used to bring him coffee out here on winter nights, back when the shop was busier, back when his body didn't ache with every movement. She'd stand in the doorway, steam rising from the mug, and she'd say, "You know what I love about you, Ray? You help people even when they can't help you back." He'd laughed it off back then, told her he was just doing his job, but she'd shaken her head. "No, it's more than that. You see people, really see them." Ray wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his temple. He didn't feel like much of anything right now. Just an old man with aching joints and a dinner table he'd never make it to. But those kids were still shivering. So he kept working. The storm hit hard just after 9. Ray heard it before he saw it. A low howl that rattled the metal garage door, followed by the sharp patter of sleet against the windows. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees in the last hour. His breath hung in the air now, visible even inside the shop. He worked faster, though his body protested every movement. The alternator had been shot, just like he'd suspected. Corrosion on the terminals, a loose belt, and a failing voltage regulator. Normally a 2-hour job. Tonight, with his hands shaking and the cold seeping into his bones, it felt like climbing a mountain. Behind him, the father paced near the doorway, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, tense. I know we're late. There's nothing I can do about it right now. Just tell them we're doing everything we can." Ray pretended not to listen, but his ears had always been sharp. The mother sat in the waiting area, a wooden bench Ray had built 20 years ago, now worn smooth from use. She had her arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. Her eyes kept darting to the clock on the wall, then to the garage door, then back to her children in the car. "How much longer?" the father called out, his voice strained. Ray straightened up, wincing as his spine cracked. "Almost there. Just need to tighten everything down and test it." The father walked over, reaching for his wallet. "Listen, I know it's late. I know we pulled you away from your family. Whatever the bill is, I'll triple it. Seriously, name your price." Ray shook his head. "I'll charge you for the part. That's it." "No, please. I don't need your money," Ray said quietly, his eyes still on the engine. "I need you to get those kids somewhere warm." The father opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked back at his wife, and something unspoken passed between them. Ray caught it. That look. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper. Relief, yes, but also fear, urgency. He'd seen a lot of stranded families over the years. Most were frustrated, annoyed, worried about the cost. But this family seemed different. They weren't just stressed about the breakdown. They were stressed about being late. The mother's phone buzzed. She answered immediately, turning away and speaking in a hushed, rapid tone. Ray caught fragments. "Security knows. Yes, they're aware. We'll be there as soon as." Security? Ray frowned, but said nothing. People had their business. He had his. He reconnected the last terminal, double-checked the belt tension, and slid out from under the hood. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold. He grabbed the keys from the workbench and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine turned over once, twice, then it roared to life. The sound filled the garage, steady, strong, reliable. Through the windshield, Ray saw the little girl's face light up. She bounced in her seat, grabbing her brother's arm. The boy grinned, the first real smile Ray had seen from either of them all night. The mother pressed both hands to her mouth, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Ray climbed out, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're good to go." The father rushed forward, pulling out a thick stack of bills. Please take this. You have no idea what you just did for us." "I fixed your car," Ray said simply. "That's all." "No." The mother stood now, crossing the garage toward him. Her voice trembled. "You did more than that. You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to help us. It's Thanksgiving. You had somewhere to be." Ray shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of their emotion. "It's what anyone would have done." "It's not," the father said firmly. "It's really not." The way he said it made Ray pause. The mother took a step closer. Her eyes were red, but there was something fierce in them now. "You have no idea who we are, do you?" Ray blinked. "Should I?" The couple exchanged another look. The father nodded slowly. "Get your family home safe," Ray said, breaking the silence. "That's all the payment I need. It's Thanksgiving." The little girl ran up to him then, throwing her small arms around his leg. "Thank you," she whispered. Ray's throat tightened. He patted her head gently, his grease-stained hand resting on her soft hair for just a moment. They loaded back into the car. The father rolled down the window one last time. "You'll understand soon," he said. "And when you do, I hope you know how much this meant." Then they drove off into the sleet, tail lights disappearing into the November darkness. Ray stood there in the cold, watching them go. Something felt unfinished, off, but he was too tired to figure it out. Ray was halfway to his truck when the headlights appeared. Not one set. 4, maybe 5. They came fast, cutting through the sleet like knives, and before Ray could process what was happening, black SUVs surrounded the front of his shop. Doors opened in unison. Men stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark suits and earpieces. Ray's heart kicked hard against his ribs. His first thought was that he'd done something wrong. Unpaid taxes finally catching up. Some old violation he'd forgotten about. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. One of the men approached him, hand raised. "Mr. Dalton, please stay where you are." Ray froze, keys dangling from his hand. Then another vehicle pulled up, the sedan he'd just repaired. The father stepped out. But he looked different now. Straighter, calmer, flanked by 2 men who moved with military precision. Ray's confusion deepened. "What's going on?" The father walked toward him slowly, hands visible, his expression serious but not unkind. When he reached Ray, he extended his hand. "I need to apologize," he said. "I wasn't entirely honest with you earlier." Ray stared at the outstretched hand but didn't take it. "Who are you?" The man took a breath. "My name is Evan Hale. I'm the governor of this state." The words didn't land at first. Ray heard them, but they seemed to bounce off his brain like stones off water. "You, what?" "The governor," Evan repeated gently. "And this," he gestured as the woman stepped out of the car, now flanked by her own security detail, "is my wife, Judge Rebecca Hale. Federal Circuit Court." Ray's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Rebecca Hale stepped forward, her face softer now, no longer etched with panic. "We were traveling without our security detail tonight. My father, he's in hospice 3 hours north of here. We got the call this afternoon that we needed to come immediately. Thanksgiving, protocols, none of it mattered. We had to go." Evan continued, his voice steady. "We left in our personal vehicle to avoid the media circus. No motorcade, no advance team, just us and the kids. We thought we could make it quietly, say our goodbyes as a family." "Then the car died," Rebecca added, her voice cracking slightly. "And we were stranded, exposed. 2 children, no security, on the side of a highway where anyone could have recognized us." Ray's head was spinning. Governor, federal judge, security. The whispered phone call suddenly made sense. "Tell them we're doing everything we can." The nervous glances, the urgency that went beyond a simple breakdown. "You helped us when you had every reason not to," Evans said. "You stayed late. You worked through pain. Yes, we saw you struggling. You refused payment. You got our children to safety. One of the security officers stepped forward, speaking into his radio. All clear. Primary and secondary secured. Rebecca's eyes glistened. Do you understand what you did tonight, Mr. Dalton? In this political climate, with the threats we receive daily, being stranded like that, if the wrong person had found us first. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ray felt his knees weaken. He reached out, steadying himself against the hood of his truck. I didn't know, he whispered. Exactly, Evans said firmly. You didn't know who we were. You didn't know what was at stake. You just saw a family that needed help, and you helped them. No hesitation, no calculation, just pure human decency. The little girl appeared then, peeking out from behind her father's leg. She waved at Ray, her small hand barely visible in the darkness. Ray waved back, his hand trembling. Your kindness tonight, Evan continued, his voice thick with emotion, protected more than you knew. You protected my family. You protected our ability to say goodbye to someone we love. You protected two scared kids who just wanted to see their grandfather one last time. The sleet had turned to snow now, soft flakes drifting down through the glare of the headlights. Ray stood there, an elderly mechanic in a stained work shirt, surrounded by SUVs and armed security, and he realized something. For the first time in years, someone saw him, not as a failing business owner, not as the father who missed too many dinners, not as an old man barely scraping by, but as someone who mattered, someone whose choice had changed everything. Evan Hale reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Ray. It was a photo of an elderly man in a hospital bed, eyes closed, breathing tube in place. Frail, fading. That's my father, Evans said quietly. Colonel Richard Hale, 86 years old, decorated veteran, served 2 tours in Vietnam. Came home and opened a small auto shop in the town where I grew up. Ray looked at the photo, then back at Evan. He closed it 15 years ago when his hands gave out, Evan continued. But he never stopped talking about those days. He said the shop taught him more about people than the military ever did. He used to say, men who fix things don't just fix cars, Evan. They fix lives. They keep families moving. They solve problems no one else sees. Rebecca stepped closer, her hand resting gently on her husband's arm. We got the call at 2 this afternoon. The doctors said he had maybe 6, 8 hours left. We dropped everything. We didn't tell the security team because we knew the logistics would delay us by hours. We got in the car and drove. Evan's voice cracked. Because of you, Mr. Dalton, we made it. We got there. We held his hand. We said goodbye. Our children got to tell their grandfather they loved him one last time. Ray felt something break open inside his chest. He thought of Sarah, of all the goodbyes he'd missed, all the moments stolen by time and circumstance. My father passed 2 hours ago, Evans said, his composure wavering for just a moment. Peacefully, surrounded by family, because of what you did tonight. The snow fell heavier now, coating the pavement in white. I looked into your shop while we were at the hospital, Evan continued. Made some calls. Found out you've been struggling. Equipment outdated. Behind on rent. Working yourself into the ground trying to keep your late wife's father's legacy alive. Ray's face flushed. Shame crept up his neck. That's my business. I don't need. My father would have loved you, Evan interrupted gently. He would have seen exactly what I see. A man who honors his commitments. A man who helps people even when it costs him everything. Rebecca spoke then, her voice soft but firm. We want to help you, Mr. Dalton. A restoration grant for your shop. New equipment. Building repairs. Paid staff so you're not carrying the weight alone anymore. Everything you need to not just survive, but thrive. Ray took a step back, shaking his head. No, I appreciate it, but I can't take charity. I don't deserve that. Charity. Evan's eyebrows rose. Mr. Dalton, do you know what you gave us tonight? I fixed a car. You gave us time, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. Time we would have lost. Time we can never get back. Do you know what that's worth? Ray looked down at his hands, scarred, stained, trembling. I was just doing what anyone. Stop, Evan said, but not harshly. He stepped closer, his face earnest. Stop diminishing what you did. You missed your own family's Thanksgiving dinner. You worked through physical pain. You refused payment from people who tried to pay you triple. You did all of that for strangers. Because it was the right thing to do, Ray said simply. Exactly. Evan's voice grew stronger. And what we're offering you, that's also the right thing to do. This isn't charity, Mr. Dalton. It's repayment of a debt you didn't even know you'd settled. Ray's throat tightened. He thought about the bills stacked on his desk. The equipment that broke down more often than it worked. The bone-deep exhaustion that never seemed to fade. He thought about his daughter's voice on the phone. Please, Dad, just this once. My father always said that the measure of a man isn't what he does when people are watching, Evan continued. It's what he does when no one will ever know. When there's no reward, no recognition, just the quiet knowledge that he did right by someone who needed him. Rebecca nodded. You could have turned us away. You had every reason to. But you didn't. And because of that choice, my children got to say goodbye to their grandfather. I got to hold my father's hand one last time. My husband got to hear his father say he was proud of him. She wiped her eyes. You gave us those moments, Mr. Dalton. Those sacred, irreplaceable moments. How do you put a price on that? The security team stood silent, respectful, giving them space. Ray felt tears sting his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they came anyway, hot against the cold air. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Evan placed a hand on Ray's shoulder. Say yes. Let us honor you the way my father would have wanted. Let us help you keep this legacy alive, not out of pity, but out of profound respect and gratitude. Ray looked past them, toward the old garage. The flickering sign, the cracked windows, the place that had become both his prison and his purpose. Then he thought about what Sarah used to say. You help people even when they can't help you back. Maybe, he thought, it was time to let people help him. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Rebecca smiled through her tears. Evan squeezed his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Ray Dalton felt like maybe, just maybe, his work had meant something after all. 3 months later, Ray stood in front of his shop and didn't recognize it. The sign was new, bright, clean, every letter glowing. The windows had been replaced, no more cracks or foggy glass. Inside, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment hummed quietly. Hydraulic lifts that didn't groan or leak. Tool chests organized and fully stocked. The concrete floors had been sealed and painted, the walls freshly done in a warm gray that somehow made the whole space feel alive again. But it wasn't just the equipment. There were people. 2 young mechanics Ray had hired, both veterans, both struggling to find work after coming home. A part-time office manager who handled the books, so Ray didn't have to stay up until midnight doing math he barely understood anymore. An apprentice program that brought in high school kids 3 afternoons a week, teaching them skills that could change their lives. The shop wasn't just surviving anymore. It was breathing. Ray's daughter stood beside him, her arm linked through his. She hadn't stopped smiling since she'd arrived that morning. Dad, she whispered, squeezing his arm. Look at what you built. I didn't build this, Ray said, shaking his head. You did, she interrupted firmly. Maybe not with your hands this time, but you built it with who you are, with the choice you made that night. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm sorry I was angry with you for missing so many dinners. I didn't understand what you were carrying. I didn't know how hard you were fighting. Ray's chest tightened. You had every right to be angry. I should have been there more. You're here now, she said simply. That's what matters. The parking lot was filling up. Neighbors, old customers, local business owners. The press had caught wind of the story. The governor's office had kept it quiet at first, but word eventually spread. Now Ray's act of kindness had become something bigger than he ever intended. A local legend, they called him. Ray hated that phrase. He wasn't a legend. He was just a man who'd stayed late one cold night. But his daughter saw it differently. So did the veterans he'd hired. So did the kids who showed up every week, eager to learn, hungry for someone to believe in them. A black SUV pulled into the lot. Ray recognized it immediately. Governor Evan Hale stepped out, dressed casually this time. No suit, just jeans and a jacket. Rebecca was with him, and the two kids, both bundled in winter coats even though spring was trying to break through. The little girl spotted Ray and ran toward him, her face lighting up. "Mr. Ray." Ray knelt down, ignoring the protest in his knees, and caught her in a hug. "Hey there, sweetheart. You keeping your dad out of trouble?" She giggled. "He says we owe you a visit." Evan approached, hand extended. Ray shook it, a firm, warm grip between two men who understood each other now. "The shop looks incredible," Evan said, looking around. "Better than I imagined." "Thanks to you," Ray said. "Thanks to you," Evan corrected. "We just gave you the tools. You're the one doing the work." Rebecca smiled. "We also heard about your new tradition." Ray nodded. He'd made the decision a month ago and had it painted on a sign near the front desk. "Stranded on Thanksgiving. Repairs are free. No exceptions. No questions asked." "My wife thought that was beautiful," Evan said quietly. "So did I." "It's what your father would have wanted," Ray replied. "Men who fix things fix lives. Isn't that what he used to say?" Evan's eyes glistened. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The crowd had gathered now, maybe 100 people, all waiting for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Ray hadn't wanted one. Felt too much like showing off. But his daughter had insisted. "Let people celebrate you, Dad. Just this once." The mayor handed Ray a pair of oversized scissors. Cameras clicked. Ray looked out at the faces, his daughter, his grandkids, the veterans he'd hired, the apprentices watching with wide eyes. And he thought about Sarah. She would have loved this. Before he cut the ribbon, Evan raised his hand, asking for quiet. The crowd settled. "I'm not here as governor today," Evan began, his voice carrying across the lot. "I'm here as a man whose family was helped by someone who didn't have to help, who had every reason to say no, but said yes anyway." He turned to Ray. "There are people in this world who serve without applause, who work without recognition, who give without expecting anything in return. Ray Dalton is one of those people. And what we're celebrating today isn't just a renovated shop. It's a reminder that kindness still matters, that one person's choice can ripple out in ways we can't predict." The crowd applauded. Ray felt his face flush. "My father used to say that character is built in the small moments," Evan continued. "The moments when no one's watching. The moments when it's easier to walk away." Ray didn't walk away. "And because of that, my children got to say goodbye to their grandfather. My family got the closure we desperately needed." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "This shop is now a place where that same spirit lives on, where people learn not just how to fix engines, but how to show up for each other, where struggling veterans find purpose again, where kids learn that honest work still has value." Evan looked directly at Ray. "Thank you, not just for what you did that night, but for showing us all what it looks like to live with integrity." The applause grew louder. Ray cut the ribbon, and the crowd cheered. But later, after the ceremony ended and people filtered inside for food and tours, Ray found himself standing alone near the back of the shop. His daughter had taken the grandkids inside. The veterans were showing off the new equipment to anyone who'd listen. He stood there in the space where he'd spent so many lonely nights, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because his problems were solved, not because he'd suddenly become someone important, but because he'd stayed true to who he was, even when it cost him. And somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. Ray Dalton had spent most of his life believing his worth was measured by how much he could endure, how much pain he could push through, how many hours he could work, how long he could keep going before his body gave out. But standing there in his renovated shop, surrounded by the sound of laughter and new beginnings, he finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell him all along. His worth wasn't in what he could endure. It was in what he chose to give, even when no one was watching. Especially then. Ray Dalton didn't know that staying late on a cold Thanksgiving night would change his life. He didn't know that the family shivering outside his shop carried the weight of the state on their shoulders. He didn't know that fixing their car would give them the gift of a final goodbye. He didn't know that his kindness would ripple into something larger than he could have ever imagined. He just knew someone needed help, and that was enough. Sometimes the moments that define us aren't the ones we planned for. They're the ones where we choose compassion over convenience, where we choose others over ourselves, where we stay when it would be easier to leave. Ray's story reminds us that kindness travels farther than we ever see. That one choice, made in the darkness when no one's watching, can light up more lives than we'll ever know. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their actions matter, that they matter. Because somewhere out there, someone's waiting for you to be their Ray Dalton. And you might never even know it, but they will.